All right, it's 7 o'clock, so I'll welcome everybody to the council meeting. Excuse me. Welcome everyone to our council meeting. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest regarding the items on tonight's agenda? Councillor Bulmer?
No.
Councillor Roth?
No.
Councillor Spoulis?
No.
Councillor Fielding?
No.
Neither do I. The motion moved by Councillor Bulmer and seconded by Councillor Roth that the minutes of the following meetings be adopted as written and distributed. Public meeting minutes, August 15th, 2018, D14 Cox. Public meeting minutes, August 15th, 2018, D14 DOU. Council meeting, September 5th, 2018, and the closed council meeting, September 15th, 2018. Is there any discussion on those? All those in favor? That's carried. Are there any minutes or any business arising out of those minutes? No, we have no public meetings. Next is communications, a monthly monitoring report for the Mill Creek Pit, license 5738. Any discussion on that? The Clare Maltby Secondary Plan and Master Environmental Servicing Plan. Yes, Councillor Bowles.
Yes, I perused the document that's available on site. It's quite extensive hydrogeology report in there, and it talks about the impact to Mill Creek subshed. So I was wondering if we can agree to have our consultant have a look at that.
Is everybody else on council okay with that? Yeah, okay. Anything else? The responses from AECOM respect to the Concession 7 Bridge Replacement Report, a number of answers to the questions that were posed there. You okay with it?
Yeah, I got a couple of points to make.
Yep.
I'm going to suggest that perhaps you, the mayor, talk to CBM or write a letter to CBM, talk about allowing the other gravel truck operators to use that detour road during the construction. And the other point, I spoke to our Director of Works, and it was mentioned here last time that we should be a little bit more vigorous on controlling the trucks going south and not going along East Caffrey. So I spoke to the Director, and I think he's going to talk to the MTO to provide more visible signs through there.
Okay. Good. Yes, Councillor Roth?
I think to avoid anyone going south on Concession 7, talk to the gravel pits, you'll get your best results. Because if they do that, the gravel pits will reprimand the drivers.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. All right, okay, so it's not quite 7:05 yet. The Regional Waterloo Integrated Urban Water System, Cambridge East Water Supply, Class Environmental Assessment, Notice of Completion. So they've completed this. We had a meeting with the residents over there, and now we're faced with this final results from the study. Councillor Roth, any comments on that?
Well, I'm of the understanding that it's been sent off to our peer review consultants. I guess we just wait until we hear back from him.
Okay. Councillor Bulmer, anything to add?
Only one thing that stood out is that they mentioned in the previous correspondence we received that the draft was going to be available at the Pussons Library, but I didn't see it mentioned in here that the final would be available. That was the only thing I noted.
Okay.
Or I can't remember if it said the library or the township office, but there was going to be a copy made available here in the
The
township.
public to view?
But they mentioned a couple of places in Cambridge,
Yeah.
but they didn't mention one here.
Okay. We'll follow up on that.
Thank you.
I have no comments until we see our peer review.
It's available online, Council Boomer. So, one good thing to see was that the adaptive water management report is going to be made available to us quarterly. So that's a very good sign.
I did have a look through some of the online stuff, and it was interesting to see the gradients in the groundwater as it moved through the system. They had some good, very descriptive maps that were a part of the report there. Okay, it's 7:05, so I'm going to call up our first delegation, but I'm going to ask council, we have a number of times here for the delegations, and I'm just going to ask that these times are approximate and that we actually allow the delegations to simply follow one another depending on how long they take. If everybody's okay with that, and then what we'll actually do as well is we'll move the report that's in the agenda up to consider right after the delegations, if everybody's okay with that, and so then we'll address the report right after the delegations finish. Is everybody okay with that? All right then. Mr. Mark Weinberg, would you like to come up? And I think you have a presentation. I just remind you that you have up to 10 minutes, and I do have a timer, so I'll give you a heads up when you got 1 minute to go.
Okay. Isn't that nice? My timer just decided it didn't like me.
Would you like me just to remind you when you have 5 minutes to go to as well? Or?
Hold on, I'll just forget this and I'll just do this. If this works. And that's okay. All right. So, I would like to, first of all, thank Karen Landry for her report on the Fox Run Park, especially for, I'm a numbers person, so the fact that everything was there was exciting to me. This is the results, the summary results in the report. I've summarized the summary because the report has the full descriptor of the questions. So status quo is the basically lawn mowing naturalization. Divest, NA, means to a neighborhood association. Divest to abutment property owners, abutting property owners, and other suggestions. So that's what that means. And then the numbers are as in the report. Now, before I go dive into things, there was one thing that confused me. When I took a look at the, don't worry, I resolved it. When I took a look at the number of actual responses, I got 50 houses responding out of the 63 surveyed, while we have 51 people ranking one, a first choice, which doesn't make sense. So when I took a look deeper into it, I discovered that one person had won twice. Okay, so it's like, so I asked Nina, who asked Karen Landry, who looked into it, and indeed what it was a check mark, not a 1. So the number, instead of status quo being 15, really status quo is 14, okay? And now our total adds up to 50, which matches up with how many respondents we have. Okay. Now, I'd like to note that 50 respondents out of 63 houses is pretty good. Okay. The other thing that was in the report, other, of course, has associated with suggestions. And suggestions, who knows what suggestions could be? But that was nicely detailed out. The report has, the letters categorized. So if walking trail was mentioned, then that house was flagged as walking trails. And if they said signage, walking trail signage, there were 4 letters like that. While if they had mentioned benches as well as walking trails and signage, and 17 respondents said that. Now, you might wonder how many people had mentioned, for example, benches. Now, that the report didn't go into further, so I broke it down that way to really see what's going on. Before we can get into that, there are some terms, like for example, walking trail and walking path. Those are really synonyms of each other. Just as a reminder, we showed in the open house our proposed, like jotted on a back of an envelope, walking trail. That's obviously not what we would end up with, but it's a conceptual idea of it. But walking trail, walking path, really same thing. The other term that is a little bit more confusing is this word accessible, entrances fixed, proper drainage, which doesn't seem to have anything to do with entrances. But it turns out that if you understand the issue, those are all referring to the same thing. If you take a look at the park, okay, the northern edge of that park has huge drainage issues. There's this gully that runs through that with marsh area that's just in a line along that route. Actually, the two ends are some of the worst. And one of the ends is over here, the entrance, one of the two entrances to the park. Zooming in on it, and this is Google Maps, you can actually see all of that damage and debris. And you cannot enter that park through that unless you cross Deerview number 15, which is trespassing. Okay? So this is a problem. Okay? So if we take all of those terms and now we break it down, what do we see? We see walking trail. Out of, there were 29 people who had other as their first choice and 2 people who had other as a second choice. So there are 31 houses who had made suggestions. So we're looking out of 31 here. So for walking trail or walking path, 31 out of the 31 said that's what they wanted. Okay. For the signage, we were at 28 out of the 31, or 90%. Benches, 84%, pretty good. Then fix that drainage, 20% roughly, said they wanted to do that. Then the rest were smaller. 2 houses wanted more trees, 2 houses wanted play structures. Lights was an interesting one. That was one that hadn't appeared before. I don't think stadium lighting would be appropriate, but perhaps nice moon lighting along the path might be nice. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. Okay. So, but basically, what other, because other could mean anything, but in this case, other doesn't mean just anything. Other actually means a walking trail. So if we turn back to the summary results, we see that the status quo, that other here, if we change it to walking trail, we get a better sense of what this is saying. So we have walking trail, 29 people ranked it, 29 houses ranked it as number 1. The next up is status quo. Okay? And now you get a true sense of what the numbers are actually saying. Okay. And I'm now going to turn things over to Gwen Zellen from 40 Fox.
So just before you leave, and
Oh, yeah,
she's the
sure,
next
I'm sorry.
delegation, but one of the counselors may have a question, that's why.
Of course.
Okay.
I
Does
will
any-
back up.
Okay, does anybody on council have a question for the delegation? Councilor Bowman first.
Well, thank you. Thank you for that. I appreciate that you're a numbers guy. Just before you leave, you mentioned quite a bit about other being the first choice, and I think you briefly mentioned there that status quo was the second choice.
Yeah.
And you talked a lot about what were the various permutations and combinations of what people's first choice was. For those who picked status quo as their first choice, since everybody could choose a first and a second choice, did you happen to rank what was the most popular second choice for people who were
Actually,
status quo?
yes, I can do actually a little bit better than that. I kind of hid the slide because I didn't want to go over time. But, and this can get a bit confusing as a slide, but it's very nice. Here.
So I need you to just respond to the question, okay?
Was there a
please?
number? Like, what was is there a simple?
I have to,
answer to it.
I have to open up the slide, unskip slide, otherwise it won't come up. All right, there we go. Because now I can see the number.
Okay.
Okay, so if we take a look, this slide shows, if you've chose rank one.
We just need an answer to his
I
question.
will. I just have to walk it through. So if square one, status quo, our first line, shows what everyone who chose status quo had as their second choice. So you can see.
okay.
Okay, that's why I'm getting to it.
Yeah.
You can see that 5 people who chose status quo chose naturalization as their second choice.
Okay.
One person.
But what was the, what was the most popular? I was just trying to get a, what was the most popular of this?
The most popular was they didn't have a second choice.
Yeah.
Oh, isn't that odd? Okay.
They just status quo, and
So
That's it.
let's leave it at that then. Okay. Thank you very much.
well, how could I want to talk more about
No,
it?
I know. Councillor Spoulis.
Yes, you mentioned the walking trail. Any thoughts on the type of walking trail, like type of material, asphalt or wood chip or anything like that?
We as a, I mean, to some degree, no. We just want it presentable and pleasant. We have been discussing that we would want, since it's for a community, a younger community, and an older community simultaneously, we want to be able to go along it with a stroller or something like that. So it's sort of like a hard midnight, but it doesn't have to be asphalt. It could be like fine crushed stone or something like
You
that.
want a firm surface?
Firm surface.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much then. Okay. And now I'll ask Gwen Zellen if you'd come up next, please.
Okay. Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, councillors, and staff. We purchased our original model home in Fox Run some 25 years ago, from our soccer days. And the area wasn't yet, of course, fully developed, but there was a promise of I back on to the park, that center area of Fox Run would be established and maintained as a park. And that was certainly part of the attraction to the area. And really, that promise of a park hasn't been truly fulfilled. Mark spoke to the longstanding issues with respect to drainage and accessibility, and so I'm one of those properties on the north side that it also results in other issues related to vegetation and weeds, but that hasn't been addressed, and now would be an opportune time when you're looking at addressing the park, that be fixed. And in fact, as he showed you those photos, it's actually fortuitous that signs haven't been put up there to access the park, because if they had been, that upper area between the houses on Deer View, access to the park, if you were to drive there, you might end up actually getting stuck, and I don't think you would want to deal with that as a council as well. So I'm in support, certainly, of the staff recommendation that the park be maintained for community use. It has been an area where community has come together several times, but it's on invitation almost from someone that backs onto the park, and I don't think people understand that it's available for everyone's use. So certainly appropriate signage, but it is a requirement to get that drainage repaired, and of course, with the addition of walking trails has been discussed. It would fulfill the promise, really, of developing this into parkland for the residents of Fox Run, and also for the expanded residents, and make it into a true park. Thank you.
All right. Any questions for the delegation? Councillor Bulmer.
Thank you very much. Thank you for that. You made an interesting comment there that I hadn't heard before, that the use of the park was often at the invitation of people who backed on the park. Is that, I don't want to surmise, but is that because it's almost an extension of the backyard? And would planting of trees there define that separation, so make more like feel more public? Should I infer that from what you were saying there?
No, I wouldn't necessarily infer that, but I know it took me a few years of living there. I mean, I was the fourth house in, but it took me a few years to realize that there was an access besides mine. Oh. And so people may not appreciate its access. Of course, it's not signed. But then it would be someone that hosts a party, maybe their house, and it spills out into the park. And maybe that helped to extend the feeling that this land can only be accessed by those backing onto it.
Right.
So certainly the signage is a great idea, but there's other things that need to be done to fulfill it.
That helps a lot. Thank you so much.
Councillor Spoulis.
Yes, you made a comment that I found puzzling, talking about a vehicle driving into the park, and is that your intent, to have vehicles drive into the park?
No, but if I guess it depends on your signage. Like, I have no idea what a sign might say there, but I assume it might say no motorized vehicles. But if it didn't, you could have a car driving in because it looks like a pathway, and then they'd go plunk and,
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very
hopefully
much.
not Mark's kids' cars either.
Next up is Barbara.
Different sizes.
Barbara Redmond, please. Oh,
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, councilors, and staff. Just to Gwen's comment there about the access into the park, we've been residents there for 21 years, and my husband still isn't sure where they are. Anyway, thank you for having us this evening. Fox Run neighborhood has been in existence for over 20 years. It's understandable that development of any park wouldn't take place during the growth period of the area, but we're fully developed and have been for some time. The township has been receiving the full complement of our tax base for quite a few years, well over 20. And the spending money that we see there is basically for our maintenance, but we haven't seen anything in regard to reinvesting in the community and enhancements or any improvements to our area. We've circulated your survey, and as a community, we responded clearly and reasonably, I feel. And we do support the staff recommendation to keep the park in public hands and not divest it. We would like to think at this time that the council would see fit to return some money back into our park and support what we would like to see in there. And we would like to hope that you would give us a commitment and a definitive timeline to have this done. And that's basically all I have to say.
okay. Thank you very much. Questions for the delegation? Anybody?
I have one.
Councilor Bulmer, sorry.
Thank you. Interesting comment you made there, but it's understandable that while it's being developed, you wouldn't necessarily expect it to be, well, Fox Run was being developed, you wouldn't expect the park to be finished or
Exactly.
enhanced. But I look at, now Phase 2 is coming closer to fruition, and I know it's going to be a different structure, it's going to be condominium, but I don't know whether we're going to have parkland dedication internally or not there, but if we don't have parkland internally dedicated there, would you expect that that additional population might also be interested in using the existing park?
I don't think anybody that lives in our area would think that they wouldn't be, welcome to use it. I'm sure that I speak for most people to say they would be more than welcome to use it, because if something isn't there available for them immediately, they could definitely come and go through our trail and
Right.
whatever. We'd welcome it. Get a chance to meet everybody. Be kind of nice.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Next up is Darren Trivedi. Am I close?
Hello, good evening everybody. This is Dhiren Trivedi from 11 Fox Run, and I believe the community need for a resource that brings people together. We don't have anything there like where the people can meet together, and the reason for our involvement rests in our belief of community parks, and as new resident, this park is important to us for meeting and socializing with members of our community in a safe environment, not on a road, as we do not have sidewalk or curbs. We understand that the community has used the park in many different ways in the past for barbecues, celebrations, and daily use by adolescents and children as a close common play field. I also support the staff recommendation to keep the park in public hands and look forward to participating in future events with our community and ask council to implement a walking trail with benches for its development. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for this delegation? All right, thank you very much.
Okay.
Next up is Claire House.
Thank you for having us. So I'm at 18 Fox Run, and I've lived there for 21 years. We built a home. My husband and I wrote a letter in support of the park, and that's been included in Karen's report and is attached to the agenda. In it, we mentioned how important that park has been for us. We raised 3 children there at this address, and most days we would see a handful more of the Puss Lynch friends joining them. The green space got extensive use over the years with activities such as soccer, baseball, tag, frisbee, football, or just crossing over to neighbors' homes. This park is a significant resource to all families in this subdivision, for young families moving in, for established residents such as ourselves who want to maintain an active and healthy lifestyle and still remain in the community where we raised our families, and for a second generation, which is now joining us or visiting us, as we look forward to watching them explore and enjoy the same space their parents have. Keeping the park and establishing it will support a diversity of residents at many stages in their lives. And so I'd like to request that a walking trail, possibly, crushed stone, be installed to support the diversity of use for the community, which would make it accessible for wheelchairs, walkers, and strollers. This community is an avid group of active walkers, and it would mean a great deal to have an accessible park as a resource. It would be much appreciated if the township were to reinvest after all of these years with the installation of a walking trail and some benches, and it would be reassuring to have a commitment from you regarding this.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for this delegation? No? Oh, sorry, Councilor Rose.
Yeah, did you say you think the trail should be accessible for wheelchairs? Did I hear that? Thank you.
There is someone in the community.
Wheelchairs, walkers, and...
Yeah, there's someone in the community that's walking around on Walker all the time. Yep.
Okay, thank you very much.
Welcome.
Next up is Judith Stolofsky-Stoffman. I apologize if I've done anything.
That's okay. I get that all the time. Thank you, Mayor and Council and staff for having us. I want to speak to a number of issues. First of all, the proximity of resources is crucial to the residents that live in this particular community. I personally agree with the staff recommendation to keep the park in public hands. That's very important. Maintaining the status quo, as has been recommended in the report, is, I would suggest, a start towards moving in the right direction for the community. But I would suggest that more needs to be done, and we've heard the requests from the other delegates. Having a walking trail will support an active, healthy lifestyle for the community as a whole. As we've heard from other members of the delegation, it would have a significant benefit to those who cannot easily access the centralized parks that may be available, so children, seniors, persons with disabilities. I've reviewed the sample signage that has been suggested in Schedule C, the 3 examples of signs. And I would suggest that the options that were provided are seemingly quite large for the area. The access points to the park are small, 25 feet on Deerview Ridge and 40 feet on Fox Run. I would ask that council consider that the signage be sized more appropriately so that it doesn't overwhelm the entrance. I would suggest a small, tasteful post, perhaps with a hanging wooden sign. And I acknowledge that the township has signs. There's probably a sign policy and this type of thing. But I think these things can be scaled down. A small, tasteful post with a hanging wooden sign might be sufficient with significantly less cost. I mean, the thought of $4,000 for a sign when we're paying, the township is paying approximately that amount to keep the grass cut on an annual basis. It just doesn't make sense as far as I'm concerned. by scaling back on the signage that's been suggested, I would suggest that it would allow for funds to be redirected towards the walking trail that we're aiming for. Also mentioned in Ms. Landry's report was the recommendation for the use of a consultant if the park were to be developed with a walking trail. It's acknowledged that professional services would be necessary for addressing the drainage issue that has been spoken about on the north side of the park. But I'm suggesting that perhaps a more informal process for the design of a simple walking trail using community and expertise and involvement might be more appropriate. The price to implement a walking trail would be far more reasonable by perhaps eliminating consultant costs, which I would suggest may not be necessary. I can talk out of the other side of my mouth as a lawyer, and I know that there's the liability issues and this type of thing. So, I mean, I recognize that there may be the need for a professional view of this, but hopefully the cost could be minimized. During the open house, an issue was raised of concern to a few of the residents that actually back on to the park. That issue was essentially a fear of the loss of the park potentially to developers. Perhaps not with this council, but perhaps with future councils. To those individuals, the status quo, as recommended in the CAO's report, doesn't go far enough, and I would suggest that those people who have raised that concern need assurance that the park could not be identified for elimination in the future, as it was in the Park and Recs master plan that was done a couple of years ago. The CAO had mentioned, with respect to this, the CAO had mentioned the possibility of deeding a right-of-way of lands to a neighborhood association in an attempt to ensure that, or to secure the park and ensure that it wouldn't be accessed for development. However, any one of the 12 abutting homes on the that abut onto that park have full access to the park, and the purchase by one of those homes by a developer could give them access potentially needed to develop the space. And so the only true way to ensure that the park remains a park is to establish it as one with, as we've suggested, very simple, useful facilities that have been requested: the walking trail, benches, signage, and good open space for public use. And we're suggesting that with that, if the park is known as a park, becomes more and more well-used, it would be impossible for any future council to consider it as being surplus. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for the delegation? Councillor Bulmer.
Thank you very much. I like your thoughts on the smaller signs, and I hope you don't mind. My question is going to maybe take advantage of your other hat that you have. When you mentioned about alternatives to hiring a consultant for the design, would one of the potentially reasonable alternatives include something to do with maybe the School of Landscape Architecture at the University of Guelph?
Yes. I would think that might be something that would be quite beneficial. I see it as a perfect project for students to work on. And I think, obviously, they would have the knowledge of requirements to comply with the AODA for accessibility and all of that type of thing. So I think that would be something that would be of great benefit. Yes.
Thank you. I hadn't gone as far as thinking about AODA, but as soon as you mentioned that, I remembered that the county has a fund for those
We do.
kind of projects, or $10,000 for.
Well, there you go. So I earned my pay today, right?
Anything else? Councillor Roth?
Yeah, you mentioned about an agreement between the homeowners association.
That was a suggestion, that was one of the suggestions that was put forward, that perhaps there be a deed to a homeowners association. As it presently stands, there isn't a homeowners association.
That was my question.
Yes, no, there isn't. And there's a lot to consider in that. If you try to do it after the fact, if it's part and parcel of a development, that there is a homeowners association is one thing. If you try afterwards to go out to 60-some houses and have people become members of the homeowners association, you may have some, that say yes, you may, so it's not really feasible.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. And now we have Mary Christidis.
Okay, thank you for having us here today. I agree with the support of the staff recommendation to maintain the park at Fox Run Estates, Block 55, Plan 795, for the benefit of the community. Inveterately, our community has invested a great deal of time and effort holding tree plantings, ensuring the grounds are kept clean through various spring cleanups and in general through use. The Fox Run Park has somewhat functioned as a common area for our community for a number of years and has the potential to become a central hub where residents can maintain a healthy, active lifestyle while at the same time allowing the neighbors to come together for informal celebrations throughout the years, as we have in the past. The residents in this community are a quiet group of people who have supported the township with its larger aspirations for centralizing the development of the more substantial community resources. We strongly feel, however, that some local resources should be available as well, for example, to facilitate those who find commuting difficult or impossible, and to help strengthen the cohesion of a local community itself. We are aware that some communities have specifically requested that some funds of their portion of the levy be reinvested back into them for specific, even ongoing projects. And we only ask that a minimal amount of the significant contribution to the township levy that the Fox Run Estates has provided for its 30 years of existence be reinvested in our community via the creation of a simple walking trail, a one-time investment with minimal maintenance. The issue of Fox Run Park has been on the table since at least 2014 and has now taken the time to hold, and council has now taken the time to hold an open house and to survey all of the residents of Fox Run as to their wishes. And we, as a community, have provided a very clear response. Consequently, I feel that the CAO's report, while appreciated, should go further based on the clear results of the township survey, and so I would like to respectfully ask council to demonstrate a commitment to our residents of Fox Run, accept the report of recommendation to maintain the park as a publicly held park with regular grass cutting and the addition of signage, but to extend the recommendation to include a walking path and benches for the upcoming budget. If that timeline seems to be too tight, have the design of the walking trail be developed during the 2019 year so that a draft plan could be included by council in the 2020 budget, with implementation commencing the same year.
Thank you very much. Any questions for this delegation? No. Thank you very much. So first, I just want to thank all of the delegations for your presentations tonight. I'm just going to read out a motion here. I have a motion moved by Councillor Bulmer and seconded by Councillor Roth. The council receives the presentations from the following delegates with respect to ADM 2018-031 Fox Run Park: Mark Weinberg, Gwen Zellen, Barbara Redmond, Darren Trivedi, Claire House, Judith Savlovsky-Stoffman, and Mary Christidis. How bad did I do? I'm sorry. Okay. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. Now, council, the report. report on the agenda. So a motion moved by Councillor Fielding and seconded by Councillor Sepoulis. The report ADM 2018-031 regarding Fox Run Park be received, and the council directs staff to include funds in the 2019 budget for consideration to maintain the park in its current standard and identify the park with signage upon completion of the township's logo and branding project. Councillor Rowe.
Yes, I would like to see us move that up a bit. I'd like to see us have a staff report back to us to see if we couldn't do this ourselves without a consultant, if it's, whether it's overseeing it or subcontracting it without the use of a consultant, because it's not the Taj Mahal we're building here. And the consultant fees will be probably 3 times the price of the path. We also have some drainage issues. I'd like staff to have a look at that. And I'd like them to bring us back a report that we could discuss this issue and maybe make a decision at the 2019 budget to go ahead with this path in 2020.
Okay. Councillor Balmer.
Yeah, I'm of a similar mind, I must admit. When I do my walking, I'm lucky I have the farm, and I don't have an issue walking with where the grass is. But when I think back, someone today mentioned the strollers, walkers, and wheelchairs, and when we were using strollers, we weren't in the path, we were out on the road. I see that with my neighbors too. And now with my mother-in-law there with her walker, there's nowhere for her to walk. She can't walk to the road. So I think there is some value in considering that path sooner than later. And I like Councillor Roth's suggestion about making best use of our internal resources. And if those aren't sufficient, I would certainly like to see something happen in 2019 on the planning side, whether that's internally or externally, for construction in 2020. I know we can't commit to spending those monies tonight, but I would like to include in our recommendation that we at least somehow nail down the planning in the 2020 year, and whichever way we do it, I don't have a preference necessarily. I like not using external consultants, but I know we need to have some sort of expertise on some of those issues. So I would support moving ahead on the planning in 2019 and the construction in 2020.
Okay. Councillor Fielding.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I'd like to address the Public Works Supervisor. We did do a similar project like this with the Wayne Stokely Trail. Did we have expertise from a consultant at the time, or I can't recall what the background was to that, if you have your recollection of it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, that is correct. We did have, I believe it was Greg Shifley, to go through and mark the trail and identify, what species of trees should come out, could come out, or should have to stay. So we did have that expertise to lay that trail out.
Okay. But I don't think his costs were prohibitive compared to some of the consultants we have to, like, we didn't have a design consultant, correct?
That was done also through Greg and other staff members, specifically the the chair of the rec committee at the time was heavily involved, Mr. Stokely, with Greg in doing the design
Right.
of that trail as well. So it was a combination of both.
And do you recall, did the staff do most of the work, or did we have to have?
It was contracted out.
It was contracted.
We don't have the equipment to do that work.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'm just trying to recall because it's sort of a similar circumstance of something that we did. I don't remember the cost being prohibitive. And I too would agree with the comments that have been made. I would like to see a trail go in there. I think that's what the majority of residents want. I think it would be good for the community, and I think it's a reasonable ask. So I would be in favor of supporting that and working ahead on that as quickly as we can.
Okay. Councillor Sepoulis.
Yes, a question of staff, of our Director of Works. With respect to the drainage problem, any solutions come to mind quickly, or does that require more intensive review and assessment?
The only issue I'm aware of is actually at the north entrance. The drainage ditch that is there and kind of there was done and installed at the original design, at the original development stage. That is, it is supposed to be a major drain issue to take water out of that middle area. Delegates are correct at the north end, to have access to the park through that entrance, a culvert would have to be installed there to create that access there because of the current drainage ditch that is there as well.
Okay, and a question of our CAO. These costs that we're talking about, could they come out of the parkland dedication fees?
They can. We would just have to report back during the budget process what those funds are already allocated for and if there are funds remaining in that particular reserve or not.
Okay, so I support what my colleagues have said. Let's move on with the design. I'd like to also include solving that drainage problem. It's no use putting a path at the north end if you can't solve that drainage problem at that location. So putting design funds in 2019 and construction in 2020, that would be my concurrence with the rest of our council.
No, sorry, no. Only because you can only speak while you're a delegation. No, I'm sorry, you can only speak while you're a delegation. So my comments on this are, certainly we need to fix the drainage issue. I actually did visit the site, and I guess I trespassed because I walked in through the north end and did have to walk around to get back there, but I thought it was important that I got back there. Certainly the opening at the south end of the park is even less discernible. If you didn't have a map and know exactly between which houses it was, you wouldn't know that there was an entranceway there. So that the two entranceways do need to get opened up a bit so that there's easy access and it's easily visible as well. Signage, when we finish our upcoming plan, but the signage needs to fit in with the compatibility of the neighborhood as well. So I think that we'll address that at its time, but it can't be a very massive sign. And I certainly agree with the delegate that said that spending a lot of money on the sign doesn't seem to make sense if we can use that money instead to improve what type of trail we end up with this in the site. I'd like to see us budget for it in 2019, but I'd actually like to see the work done in 2019 if we can as well, that if we need to bring in somebody from outside if there is a liability issue, and there would be with a walking trail if we constructed something that wasn't up to standards, we're just asking for trouble down the road. So we may need to get some advice there. Whether the university can provide that advice or not, I think it's an interesting concept and certainly one that we can ask about as well. So I'd like to see us have this discussion in the 2019 budget. We actually determine what we're going to do and see if we can actually move ahead. Having walked around that neighborhood a couple of times, there are no sidewalks, and they're fairly deep ditches around a lot of it, so it isn't really an easy place to walk with the traffic that's going around there. Fox Run Phase 2 is going to add to it, not hugely, but it is going to add to it. So I think it's an opportunity. A couple of times the delegates mentioned I guess what the concept had been when they originally moved in there. That's certainly prior to my time and involvement around the community here. So I don't know what commitments were made by the township at that point in time, but I think that we have an opportunity here. It's a public space. It's open to the public that we should, as was pointed out in the Recreation Master Plan, it's underused now, and council did agree to go ahead with some programs at the Recreation Center to improve the use there, the utilization of that facility. And I think we need to do the same here, so that's how I feel about it. So with that, we need to add to, sorry, did you want to make some
Well, I was
comments?
just going to note, if I can just clarify, with respect to the signage, the intent of providing that signage with the report was just to give examples of signage and costs. By no means was it indicative of the type or the size of signage that would be put in, because the intent with going through this branding and logo branding exercise is to make signage across the township uniform, and of course, in keeping signage would be developed based on the scale of what we were putting it towards, and we would want to have that uniform signage throughout, whether it's here at the township office or in the various parks. So that will be definitely reviewed at the appropriate time. And then I guess the other thing, just with respect to the motion that's on the floor, I just want to make sure that I am clear that we bring back for the 2019 budget discussions, just the cost as it relates to putting in the trail as well, and I'll include that that's an accessible trail. And also look at what the cost would be associated with the drainage component and implementing that in 2019.
Okay, Councillor Wilson.
Mayor, I'd like to add the benches in as well.
So certainly we can put the cost of that into the budget discussions as well.
Yep.
Yeah, if I could, so just to clarify, we're looking at putting it all design and build in 2019. If we can do it, we'll do it in 2019, and if we have to split it up into 2 years, we'll split it up in 2 years at that time.
Yeah, that's the way I think.
That's what I think.
Councillor Bulmer, I've heard around here is that if we can get it accomplished next year, that we do. If not, at least all the design's done and then the work continues into the next year. I think that the drainage may be an
Yeah.
issue, but we may be able to go ahead with other parts, recognizing that the drainage is going to be addressed at some other time.
Sounds good, thanks.
Everybody's okay with that then? All right, then. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. So now I'm going to go back to our regular agenda. But if you could leave quietly, please, I'll give you a moment.
Intergovernmental.
Intergovernmental affairs. Okay, intergovernmental affairs. First one up is the City of Toronto on gun violence. Next, Puslinch Beach and Marine, ECA for sewage works. Royal Canin, new permit to take water, 240,000 liters per day. The next three are from the GRCA, the Rural Water Quality Program well decommissioning. Oh, they closed the door. Could you? Okay. The cover program and the member attendance report. Let me see there. The next up is OPSU and government involvement in cannabis stores. Aurora and Greenbelt protection. The Township of Selwyn, the agricultural system mapping. They also have some challenges with that. Councillor Roth?
Yeah, I'd like to support that motion.
I'm just wondering from the mayor, the discussions you had at AMO, do you think we need to go this next step further, or this sufficient?
Well, we can certainly support that won't interfere with the discussions. I know that they're having well, they're scheduled to start some discussions this month. I don't know that they've actually taken place yet around the mapping. That was the commitment that was made in the delegation with municipal affairs and housing, but I think that there's no harm in supporting.
I would agree with Councillor Roth.
Okay, is everybody else okay with that? Sure. All right. Do you want to move her and second?
I assume Councillor Roth was my mover and Councillor Sapoulis was
Yep.
my seconder.
Yes.
All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. LPAT, the Local Planning Appeals Support Center. So this was something that was discussed when they were going through the OMB review and an issue that came up from time to time about OMB hearings, and now they're moving ahead with that. So I think they'll certainly have some challenges in how they select which particular items they're going to support, but they're going ahead with it at least.
For now.
Yeah, for now, I agree, Councillor Bowman. The Township of Amaranth, the Dairy Supply Management Program, everybody's nervous about that, I think. Oakville, regulating the display and distribution of objectionable images. I seem to recall that Guelph went through a similar exercise a few years ago with some items on buses.
Yeah, there's some issues.
North Frontenac, they want to grandfather volunteer firefighters to NFPA standards. Yes, Councillor Spoulis?
Yes, I was wondering, do we have that same issue here?
Well, we're about to have the chief and the deputy chief up here in a minute. We might want to ask them at that point.
Okay, if you can cure that item
Yep.
for the...
And the last one, South Glengarry Paramedic Services as a full essential service. There's some concern there about that not being included in that. So, I have a motion moved by Councillor Roth and seconded by Councillor Bomer that the intergovernmental affairs correspondence items listed on the council agenda for the September 19th, 2018 council meeting be received. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you. Back to my agenda here.
Chief.
Oh, Puslinch Fire and Rescue Services, come up here, please. I'm switching, I apologize, I'm switching back and forth between the original agenda I started marking up and the second amended agenda that I ended up with. So I apologize if I'm stumbling. It's all good. Welcome, Chief and Deputy Chief.
Well, thank you. I was going to sit there.
Don't fight over the chairs. Go ahead.
Your worship and members of council, thank you very much for allowing the fire department to come here and speak on 2 reports that were submitted earlier. First, I'd like to speak in regards to Fire Report 2018-002, and that's our monthly report. And I'd like to start off by just apologizing that it's a 6-month report and not a monthly report. But the reasoning behind that is we've gone through a bit of a transition in the fire department when it comes to standard incident reporting. We've become a lot more efficient, and we had some personnel changes as well. And I didn't want to report if the data wasn't going to be true. So now we've done some quality control. It's been reviewed by the Ontario Fire Marshal's office, and I can say that the data reported is 100% true. So I'll start with the beginning of that report. That's an article explaining a new program that we recently implemented in the township, and it's actually expanded a little bit further than the township, and it's gone across Wellington County. So this program is our fire hydrant signage program, and we identified a need to do this because in the township of Puslinch, we have approximately 100 fire reservoirs. So it's fire department connection with a water tank below it. And even though we had these plotted on Google Earth, and some of our members have memorized where these locations are, it's hard to do with 100, and it's hard to do when staff changes over for the new staff to realize where these fire hydrants are located. And the last thing we wanted, not only as a management group, but department-wide, was to actually pass a fire hydrant, the closest fire hydrant, if we needed water right away. So by identifying these with signage, we feel will help. We've also asked that Guelph plot these on their GIS system, Guelph being Guelph Fire Dispatch, and they're in the process of doing so at this time. Before we implemented this, we did some research, and we wanted to see if there was a similar system in place. There are some, when it comes to snow levels, for pressurized hydrants. And that signage is usually identified by one symbol that's recognized by the National Fire Protection Association. And they didn't have another symbol that would basically identify a non-pressurized source, which is what we have here in the township. And that means that when you open up the tap, we don't get water coming out of these hydrants, that we have to use a draft or a vacuum suction to pull the water from these tanks that are below. So to identify these, we decided to just change the signage a little bit and go with a blue symbol. From previous history dealing with other departments, it seems to be the norm, but not a standard, that blue is identified as a water source that's non-pressurized. So we thought we'd standardize this. Before we implemented it into our township, we delivered this program to the Wellington County Fire Chiefs Association. And we wanted their feedback, first of all. We got really good feedback, and from the feedback, we realized that there was nothing in place. And on that association, we have a lot of people that have been in the fire service for a long time, and they could not think of any signage similar as well in the province. So they were on board. They liked our design. They liked the concept. So now we have multiple municipalities within the county that are using this signage. So it's gone well. We've also pushed this forward a little bit more. So by recognizing that it wasn't already in place with NFPA, National Fire Protection Association, we decided to actually submit an application to have that added into that standard when it comes to recognized symbols across the world, basically. So we'll see what happens from there. Just a spin-off from that program is that and excuse me if I'm rambling too much, if you want me to cut it shorter. I'm catching up from 6 months.
Yeah, I was gonna say, 6 months.
So a spin-off from that program was that we also recognized that we were performing inspections on these water tanks on private property, and we did not have to do that as a fire service. That the onus was on the property owner to do so. We only need the documentation stating that they've had it inspected. We need the documentation given to us annually, then we submit that to Fire Underwriter Survey. And that's saving us a lot in wages from having our staff go out there and perform this exercise. And it's probably saving us a little bit in wear and tear in our pumps and our apparatus as well. So it's a good program. It's been welcomed by the property owners because I think they realize that they've been privileged to have us provide that service in the past. But really, we weren't an agency that should have been providing that service. So now it's being done properly as far as we're concerned. So that's good. Okay, so now I'll move forward into that report and I'll talk about responses a little bit. So we changed, the format might look the same in the report to what you've seen in the past, but response types have changed in the first column on your left. And the reason we did that, and it took a bit of time to do that, is now that column corresponds with how we report to the Ontario Fire Marshal's Office. Okay, so those are their classifications. And how that lines up is, it lines up with our software program that we have, Firehouse Software, and it lines up identically with those codes. So when we report, and I'll let Brad, if that's okay, speak on that, because Brad's been in charge of this program with the assistance of Courtney there in the back. They've done a tremendous job, so I'll let him speak a little bit further on how that's developed and how that's going, so.
Sure, as far as the types and how we report?
Yes, please.
Sure.
Can you just swing the microphone over that way?
Yep.
Thank you. That's it, perfect.
Is that okay? All right. So we've always been reporting. It's one of the things that we're mandated that the fire chief has to do is to report our incidents to the fire marshal's office quarterly. So before, up to probably February of this year, for every call we were basically hard copy filling out a report and submitting it as a hard copy. So what we've done is we've trained our staff on scene just to make a little bit more detailed reports, more information. So basically to train them to get the more of the required information that we need to capture within our reports. Then we were able to, through the fire marshal's office, set up that we could just do e-filing, if you want to call it that. Mm-hmm. So what happens now is the reports are gathered. I'll go through them and give them to Courtney, and then she'll enter them into Firehouse. And then basically at the end of the quarter, I can just simply highlight that whole group, send it off. It takes 10 minutes instead of 10 hours per week, basically, to do all that stuff where you do the hard copy. So as far as the chief mentioned the categories, it's really important that we capture those specific categories because that's how all of the safety programs and fire code changes are made across Ontario. As well as we can see what fire risks we have in our own community of Puslinch. And then we can develop our own public fire life safety education programs based on that information. So it's really important that it's captured accurately, as well as the programs that we already have for fire and life safety and our fire suppression operations. We can also, based on those statistics in those categories, we can evaluate how well we're doing with our actual fire prevention and our life safety programs. So, yeah, so it's really efficient. It's we're moving ahead. I think that we can even possibly, there's some things that we're going to look at forward in the next 6 months with the program and with our own staff that we might even be able to streamline it even more. So it's been great.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks, Brad. And there's a level of quality control there that
Move the
really
microphone
wasn't there
back.
before.
Just move.
Oh, my
Sorry, we only
apologies.
have one microphone.
So what Brad also does is the quality control component on our reports, and then we have that second level where the OFM then reviews them. So I love getting everything back, and it's 100% true, and that's what we reported on. Like I said, we also got rid of some duplication. So Brad Brad alluded to the fact that now it's basically a few steps, and we can send our reporting from Firehouse software directly to the OFM, where in the past, we were duplicating that task. So it was entered into Firehouse software, but then our administrative assistant was going into the OFM's reporting program and basically reporting twice. So we eliminated that step, sorry. So we're a lot more efficient that way, which is good. Okay, so I'll just keep going through the report a little bit. I'll just talk about professional development. So after the response types and the responses that we went to and all the stats there with fire losses and everything else, I wrote down some data in regards to firefighter training. And just to elaborate a little bit more, all the subject matter that was listed in that report is in-session training that's done on Tuesdays and Wednesdays in-house. I just changed the way it was laid out a little bit. And basically, if you look at some items, a lot of it's delivered by our own staff, and sometimes we will bring in professionals, depending on the subject matter. So you will see under a number of classes, sometimes we only have one, and what we would do is condense the Tuesday and Wednesday class into one session to make sure that we don't duplicate the same session when we're spending any funds for an expert to come in, but also to have good attendance when they do come and do a session for us. Then I don't think this has been done before. It hasn't through me, but I thought I'd put some faces to some names with our new recruits. So our newest 4 recruits are listed there. And, well, I hope you guys like it. And if you don't, let me know and I could eliminate it. And then we did have some promotions over the last 6 months, and those were listed too. So Paul Spearman became our fire and life safety educator, and we promoted Ryan Bonneville and Mike DeLue to acting captains. Also, I did skip one portion of the report. I didn't elaborate on it, but invitations have gone out already to everyone, I hope, and everyone in the township and our neighbors as well in other communities. We're celebrating our 50th anniversary this Saturday. It's going to be a great time from noon till 4. Please come out, and we'll have barbecue and some speeches and fun activities, so it'll be good. And then the tail end of my report, and just because this becomes a lot more detailed, but because we changed the format and response types, I wanted to elaborate on those response types because it did change a little bit. So maybe it condensed some other topics that we had on the previous report, so this would elaborate on those categories. And if you would like this type of detail on future reports, please let me know. If not, and you have an understanding of it, I can leave that out in future reports and just answer any questions accordingly next time. So, whatever the council desires as far as reporting when it comes to that. That's all I had to say in regards to Fire Report 2018-002. We're willing to entertain any questions.
We'll see what questions we have. Councillor Roth. Sure.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. I agree, I'd rather see you monthly than every 6 months. I really appreciate the fact that you're gaining efficiencies. I always like to hear that word, and I'm sure it's a lot easier on you guys as well. And the accuracy is another good thing. I wouldn't mind seeing this last part you talked about on a monthly basis. It's a little maybe overwhelming if we only get it every 6 months, but
yes,
I like that.
Okay.
And the only other thing I want to say is I look forward to seeing you on Saturday.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Ballmer.
Thank you. Thank you for your report. Love this fire hydrant signage, the dry hydrant signs. That's really brilliant. But it made me realize, a lot of these hydrants that were put in, they're privately owned, they're put in by the landowners as a requirement for them to get their building permits. And now this signage program, now they're allowing us to use them sort of as a public resource, as a shared resource, so, which is kind of interesting because it's to everybody's benefit. But it made me think about when we're doing a new industrial park, have you ever heard of any place or seen any place where we plan from the beginning that these dry hydrants go in as a shared public resource as opposed to having them, put in by the individual landowners, so that if we put them in up front, it opens up all the possibilities for the things. And I don't know how that could work, but have you ever heard of that being done?
I have not. It's done, as we know, for residential subdivisions, but on a commercial basis, I'm not aware of any, Deputy Chief.
No, it's usually, there's normally nothing there.
Yeah.
So, sorry, there wouldn't normally be a structure in that vicinity, so for them, it would be, the primary use would sort of be for that structure, for them to be allowed to have their blueprints and things approved. That has to be part of it, part of their fire protection system.
Yeah.
We have sort of the right, I guess, to go onto any property to get water. Yeah, I'm not really sure.
Councillor Bullmer, I think that's very forward-thinking, and I think it's a great idea. So right now, we're only utilizing it to have them comply with the Ontario Building Code. So it's 600 square meters or larger for the size of the building, or 3 stories, and then we require that. But when it comes to large development areas, like I said, that's forward-thinking, that's a great idea, and maybe that's something you can discuss with the building department, and we'll see what happens. Maybe that entices businesses to come if we have a business park that's assisting with facilities like that.
It just makes me think if we had to put them in first down where we are, they would have been distributed more evenly around the development, more to a shared benefit. Thinking of your needs as well as the building needs. So.
That's correct. And I know the building department has had questions where a business wants to develop in a lot across from an existing building that has a fire reservoir, and they're wondering why they need one too, because there's one across the road. So that's a very valid question, but I can't elaborate on that any further. But like I said, I think that's a great idea.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Fielding?
Thank you for the report. It's very concise. It will be good, not too much for me because I'm not going to be here much longer, but I'll be good on a monthly basis because this was thankfully a smaller report, but sometimes we have upward, 700, 800 pages. So if we can get it in more condensed version monthly, I think it'll help council a lot. So, but it is very concise. It was just a lot to take in all at once. So thank you for that, and we'll see you on Sunday.
Okay, thank you. Understood, and I'll correct that.
Saturday. Oh,
Saturday.
I did my calendar for Sunday, too. I'll be there Saturday. I'm sorry.
Councillor Sapoulis?
Yes, question relating to the North Frontenac resolution whereby they had a motion to grandfather of volunteer firefighters to NFPA 130 standards. Do we have to worry about that in our situation?
Did you say 130 standard?
NFPA standards. So sorry, 130 is my old job.
Okay. So, sorry then, could you just repeat that,
Yeah, it
please?
says, the council receives the Director of Emergency Service Fire Chiefs Administration report entitled Grandfathering of Volunteer Firefighters to NFPA Standards, update for information purposes. In other words, they want to ask the government to grandfather all the volunteers, all the firefighters.
Okay. I'm not aware of that exact report. However, we did go through a grandfathering process. We grandfathered all the firefighters that we could to different levels of NFPA standards, including firefighter 1, 2, training officers, fire officers, public educators, and we've got quite an intensive list at this time. I did want to report to council on the regulations and how we're going to respond to them. And however, I was advised by Fire Chief Brad Patton from Wellington, or Center Wellington, that I just delay that a little bit because he is chairman of our Provincial Advisory Committee for the Ontario Fire Chiefs Association, and he has heard that there's going to be amendments to those regulations. So before we make some decisions on something that might change, his recommendation is that we wait. So that is forthcoming. And I don't see it being, based on a recent webinar I sat through the Ontario Fire College, being as heavy as a hit financially for us to comply with the regulations.
Yeah, a couple other things. I'm really pleased with the fire hydrant program. It's too bad you couldn't patent and make us money.
You're welcome to do it on my behalf.
No, I really like the report. It's very concise. I've been with Councillor Roth that I agree that the Appendix A should be included. I like looking at the detail and saves asking you questions in public. What does Category 9 mean? You got it all broken down.
Okay.
So on Category 9, specifically, there's an item there, incidents not found. Is that a concern that it's rising, or is that more or less stable? I'm just concerned that we might be, you might be subjected to spurious phony calls type of thing.
For me, it's a big concern. I don't think they're phony calls. I just think with everybody now having cell phones and not knowing where they are on highways such as the 401, that it puts us in a wild goose chase. So it's hard. We do have that screening tool, which is a couple dispatch centers that try and screen where this call came from. And sometimes they can pinpoint the cell phone, and we do get the longitude, latitude of that, but whether or not they confirm where that call came from, or we just get the identification, I'm not sure. But we do get a lot of those calls from callers that are giving us misinformation, and we do have to go out and investigate because we're asked to do so. We cannot deny that.
Absolutely. No,
Yeah.
no. So I'm just
But
concerned you're.
That is a growing concern, and what also happens is, if you look at the morale that for our fire service, what happens is you're getting our firefighters leaving their home, their workplace, special events. If they're doing so, they want to actually provide service to the community, and they come out and they do nothing. And it's heartbreaking. It's tough on them, for sure.
I can imagine that, yeah. No, that's great. Look forward to seeing you on Saturday as well.
Well, thank you, John.
Okay. A question about the dry hydrants. We have, I know we've talked about them in the past. I don't recall the number being over 100, but because that came as a surprise to me. Is that typical of our municipality our size, or is it because we've got a fairly large industrial commercial section for the size of the municipality because of the 401?
I'll just speak to what I know.
Okay.
So we do have a large commercial base and industrial base, which is great for our community, and I think that's a contributing factor. When I did ask the other neighboring municipalities how many signs they wanted to purchase, I think the other highest quantity was 30. So yes, we're probably 3 or 4 times the size of most municipalities in Wellington County.
Okay. Next thing is, as far as the new firefighters, I think this is a great idea. I really like the idea of having a picture and sort of a little intro to the new people. Michael DeLue didn't have acting captain written under his name, so he may push back on
My fault. My apologies.
That's all right. But, yeah, I'd like to certainly see that continue. The detailed incident report, yeah, I'd like to see it for a little while. We might get comfortable with it to the point where we say, okay, now we sort of understand the way it's going, and just looking at the other codes is enough for us. But I would ask that somehow you figure out how to increase the font or make it a little darker or something, because it was difficult for us in the electronic version to read. It didn't scan well or something. It was.
So Mayor, just to confirm, that's for the detailed report? Yeah. Is that correct at the end? Okay. I'll work with some of the staff to see if they can assist. However, this is a very antiquated program that we're using, Firehouse software. It is looking at being evolved, so it was purchased by another company that does want to change the software, make it more user-friendly, and but for now, we might be stuck with this for a little bit.
System generated.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
It just didn't scan well. It was a little challenging.
Sorry.
And, I mean, it's a detailed report, so you know that you're going to be spending some time, but then having to squint a bit to see the font. If there's anything you can do, that would be great. Otherwise, great.
All right, thank you.
6 months all at once, we appreciate it. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Roth and seconded by Councillor Bomer that report FIR 2018-002 with respect to Puslinch Fire and Rescue Services monthly update be received for information. All those in favor? That's carried. Now, Guelph.
Okay. So this is in regards to Fire Report 2018-003, Fire Dispatch Services Agreement. So our recommendation is that council, the Council of Township, that the Council of the Township of Puslinch receive the report, Fire 2018-003, dated September 19th, 2018, regarding Puslinch Fire and Rescue Service Dispatch Services Agreement between the Township of Puslinch and the City of Guelph, and that Council and the Township of Puslinch authorize the mayor and the clerk to execute a fire dispatch agreement with the City of Guelph with respect to updated service levels for Puslinch Fire and Rescue Dispatch Services as part of the Puslinch Fire Master Plan Implementation 9-1-2.
Do you want to talk about the report? Or
Yes, I can talk a little bit about it, for sure. So this was quite the process, and we sat down, a lot of email communication was distributed, and then we sat down as a group, the CAOs and fire chiefs of Center Wellington, Guelph Aramosa, and Puslinch, and we hashed out the details, and we came to an understanding that we felt would be acceptable by all of those three municipalities sitting at the table, including Guelph, so they would be the fourth. So we've had, in the past, we had dispatching services from the City of Guelph, and I think that started in 2007 under a formal agreement where they provided call taking, basically 911 calls, and then they would dispatch these calls through our pagers to the firefighters, and then dispatching services stopped at that time. They were charging $1 per capita, I think, if I remember correctly, for those services. In 2015, a report was proposed to council that, and this was based on the master fire plan, that the City of Guelph now take on full dispatching services. And what that means, not only would they take the 911 call, they would dispatch it through our pagers, but then they would stay and provide all the rest of those communications that are required through their dispatching service. That was approved by council here, but Guelph hesitated to sign it, and I think the reasoning behind that is they weren't fully prepared to put their name on the dotted line for a few different issues, and I think one maybe would have been compliance to an NFPA standard and upgrading the equipment so that they can do this properly, including some software requirements as well. So right now, we're working under a letter of understanding. So we started receiving full dispatching services from the City of Guelph last year. It's gone very well. There are some hiccups, and they are very open to our concerns when we do have our concerns, and they correct them as soon as possible, which is good. And what that also alleviates from our side is we used to have a suppression staff member go into dispatch, so the first arriving firefighter would have to do those duties, and now we can assign them to a vehicle and go out there and respond right away, which assists in our response times and then the safety of having more personnel dealing with that event. So as far as the agreement goes, the agreement is a 5-year agreement, and it's based on the latest census, the 2016 census. But it does talk about a little bit of a rollover agreement, and that only applies to any changes that Guelph might have in regards to costing, and that they would send us ahead of time for approval. So if something changes on their end, that would change from this agreement being at, can I disclose the amount verbally? Okay, $225 per capita. Then that would have to be approved by council, and we would move from there. But if it stays status quo, basically it's a 5-year agreement, which is good based on the census, like I said, from 2016. I also included a table with, and it was reported to council in 2015, just showing some data that the fire chief at that time received on other amounts or costs per capita for dispatching services. And looking at that, I think, well, my assumption is that we're getting very good value for $2.25 per capita. I'll close there and answer any questions.
Okay, Councillor Roth.
So I don't really have any questions, but I agree. I think this is very reasonable costing for the township. And if it's a good system and it works better, excuse me, it's a great thing, so.
I think so.
Good work.
Okay. Councillor Bulmer.
Thank you. Yeah, I just have one question, relates to just two of the clauses, 713, 7.13 or 713 and 9.1. 713 deals with that 5 years after termination, 5 years after termination of the agreement, sort of the confidentiality requirements or clauses would expire. But in 9.1, it says that following termination, the liability obligations would remain, but there's no expiry date. I'm just trying to figure out why our responsibility to keep things confidential would have an expiry date, or why these two wouldn't be the same. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't need an answer tonight, but
Okay.
if staff could look into that difference,
Okay.
help me understand why there's a limitation on keeping things confidence before we sign it, that'd make me comfortable.
Okay. I'll get a better understanding of those two items
Thanks.
and report back.
All right, Councillor Fielding.
I have no questions.
Councillor Spoulis.
Yeah, it looks like a very good deal. Just curious, do we have a similar one with Cambridge? And if we do, what's the price on that?
No, we don't have a similar agreement with Cambridge. Cambridge does their own dispatching services, and at the time, we didn't seek, and they didn't extend their services to us. So they're in-house. The next neighboring municipality that I would use as a comparable that could offer their services to us would be Kitchener, and their costs were listed there as well. And I think they were, just off the top of my head, about double, maybe a little bit more than double. Yeah.
Well, that's a very good deal.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad to see that we're going to have an actual formal agreement with them, rather than, and glad to hear, because I do remember the discussions around them having to enhance what they had there in order to comply with what we were really looking for, and that came out in the master plan as well. And when I look down the table of what other municipalities are charging, this is very reasonable, so I'm happy with that. So I think that's all good. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Fielding and seconded by Councillor Sepoulis. The report FIR 2018-003 with respect to fire dispatch services agreement with the City of Guelph be received for information, and the council enacts a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute a fire dispatch services agreement with the City of Guelph.
Can I just have one question on that? Would it be possible to clarify that thing before you sign?
I think before we'll agree it. Yeah.
I mean, I don't need to have a report back here. I trust the staff can
Yep.
sort that out.
I think we'll get staff to look into that before we actually sign the agreement.
Thank you.
Okay. All those in favor? That's carried. So, you'll be back in October?
Well, I think there's only one council meeting in October,
only a
so why don't we
daytime.
say
Oh,
November?
November. Okay. Sorry about that. Just wanted to try and book it into your calendar. Thank you very much, Chief and Deputy
you.
Chief, and we're all looking forward to Saturday.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thanks. All right. Next up, Administration Department, ADM 2018-030, the Health and Safety Audit. And I think we're going to have somebody come up and talk about that, too. Welcome, Courtney.
Thank you. Good evening. Good evening, Mayor and members of council. I'm here to provide an update following the health and safety audit that was completed in January of this year. As outlined in the report, the audit identified several areas of improvement in respect to health and safety for the corporation. Staff has developed with the assistant of the auditor, Liz Sisolak, a multi-year action plan to address the areas of improvement. I would like to walk you through the individual action items and provide an overview of staff recommendations in the report. And I welcome any questions and comments when I'm done. Okay, so in the report, the first part of the discussion, you can see our action plan that's broken down into 3 years, which is a suggestion of the auditor. So the first part of the audit that we noted where there was an area for improvement was the Joint Health and Safety Committee itself. So we discussed the possibility of joining the Fires Committee with the Townships Committee because the Fires Committee was already established. They have a great plan and procedures and everything already in place. So we wanted to join them for the period of 1 year as a pilot program, just to make use of what they've already established and to improve our own procedures and the procedures for the corporation as a whole. So the committee has decided to do this for, like I said, the duration of 1 year. We will meet quarterly, so we'll have 4 meetings with them. And the objective is to share existing knowledge, procedures, and to make improvements that will benefit the township and the corporation as a whole. The next area that was noted as an area for improvement was documentation. So we've completed the first step of this, which was identified in year 1 of the action plan, and that was to update all of our health and safety boards. So we have 5 throughout the township. There are 2 here in the main office, 1 over at Fire, there's 1 at the community center, and 1 at the org. So we've done that, we've updated them, we've made them all look the same. So that is for the ease of inspection. Whoever's doing those inspections, they can walk in and everything will look the same so they know if there needs to be an update where it needs to be. The second item for documentation, which we're going to start in year 2, is the job risk analysis. So this is something that's recommended, but we've yet to do it, which is okay, and we are going to start that in year 2, like I said, where we want to identify what jobs would pose a potential risk to employees. We want to develop templates and training to assist the department heads in creating these job risk analysis that are to be reviewed on an annual basis going forward. So this is a large undertaking, so we've spread it out into 2 years. So starting in year 2 and to be finished in year 3. Another area in the audit that needed some attention was our training. So we have started in year 1 by developing a comprehensive training tracker for all employees for department heads to utilize. So this will be broken down by department. We are going to use our existing resource, which is the Human Resource Downloads Program, which we renew annually, and it offers a wide variety of different programs and trainings. And so that's where we're going to start with it, and then work from there to see if there's any additional training that department heads want to see for their employees. The township has discussed working with OCAL, which is the Occupational Health Clinics for Ontario Workers, to arrange a 1-day ergonomics training session. So this is something that's offered to Ontario workplaces at no cost, and it would be a representative from OCAL coming in and offering a 1-day to our staff, just if they have any specific questions, but they would run something to improve their ergonomics in their specific workplace. Another item that was identified to improve some ergonomics in the office was to purchase headsets for our customer service employees. They're on the phone probably 50% of the day, and so right now we have them like this. So we would like to get them headsets and include that in the 2019 budget. Another item that's been identified is having an annual fire drill. So we are working with the fire department, and they are coming up with an emergency plan for us, and they will identify what needs to be purchased, if anything, for training and that sort of thing. We're planning on doing the fire drill in November of this year, and then working from there if there's any improvements or training that needs to be done to do this on an annual basis. And finally, the Health and Safety Committee is working on several initiatives for our wellness part of our training, and it's going to be to promote engagement for the staff. And we have several events that we're thinking of. The first one is a step challenge to happen in November of this year. For those that want to participate, the cost is around $4. Standards and procedures was another item that we noted from the audit that could use a little bit of work. So we've been working on onboarding and offboarding procedures for new employees leaving the township, and standardizing that across the departments so that department heads have something to work with for what training requirements and other requirements needed for when staff come on board. In the second year of the implementation plan, it's recommended that the township develop a violence and harassment program in addition to its existing policy. So the program would include training for staff. The health and safety inspections have been conducted monthly and will continue to be conducted monthly. We will be generating reports to be sent to department heads when action is required. Contractor responsibilities was identified in the audit for improvement. So we are going to come up with a list of contractors that we will work with based on, I think it was a vendor program that Mary was going to establish. But what we would like to see is contractors sign off on our policy and identify if they have their own policy based on the size of the organization they're working with. And finally, the financial implications. So for the training, we are going to utilize our Human Resources Downloads program as much as we can, because that is something that we renew annually and it has some great programs to offer. We are looking into supervisor training, as that was a recommendation in the audit. Any proposed costs that are associated with training are to be considered as part of the 2019 operating budget. And should the township decide to discontinue with the joint committee with fire and our offices, then we would need to certify another member of our team because we only have one. So that would be an additional cost of around $1,200. Any questions?
Great, thank you very much. Councilor Roth.
Well, thank you. It was a very good report. I'm really pleased to see that we have a plan in place. It's long overdue. When you read the audit, it's a little scary of, how many areas we're really lacking in, but I think in your plan, you've captured the most important things pretty quickly, and I really want to commend you for that. And I think we're on a good track. Something just as simple as headsets. I never thought, but if you're standing there like this all day, I'm sure you'd have a neck when you go home. So it's quite interesting. And I just want to ask you a question on contractors, and I don't know if you know the answer, and it's not that important, but you mentioned size. So how many employees does someone have to have before they need a plan? Do you know that? Or?
So if the Act regulates that if you have less than 5, you do not need a policy, nor do you need a committee.
Okay.
If you have between 5 and 20, you're required to have a policy, but not a committee. And if you have more than 20, you have to have both.
So if we hire a contractor and they didn't have a plan, they'd have to sign off on ours, or?
I think that's the idea.
Okay.
So by gathering the information of the size of the organization, we'll be able to decide if they need to use our complete policy, if we're wanting to take a look at theirs and have them sign off on ours with their contract. It'll just give us a better idea.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Ballmer.
Thank you. Good evening. Yeah, excellent. I must admit, seeing the details of this made me look at my own place, walking around the farm and in my drive shed with a whole new light. Don't come to my place yet. I have a lot of work ahead of me. But there were a couple of things that did stand out for me that I was really glad to see were identified. One of those was the idea, I was amazed at all the detail about surrounding first aid kits. And then even before the light bulb came on for me, the recommendation came up in the report about making sure we have people who have first aid training. I mean, what's the point of a first aid kit if no one knows how to use it? It's nice they have to have the booklet, but I can't imagine anybody sitting down and taking the time to look through the index and while someone's bleeding. So having the training up front was so valuable. So I really appreciated that was identified as one of the things that we need to work on. The other piece was the need for some windows in that new meeting room. I remember that was something that I was concerned about and I'm hoping we can get that fixed up soon. So those are two things that stood out for me. But you've made a point that you want to look at doing a fire escape plan. And I think that's brilliant. I can remember going back, Aberfoyle, we used to have to write them for our own homes and bring them in for the fire department to approve. But it made me think of a situation that happened in the Orc several years ago when there was almost a tornado and a severe storm and high winds. And we realized that this was the farmer's market. There was, what do we do? Where do we go? What does any renter do? Does the staff person there know where people should shelter when there's a potential tornado or severe winds at the Orc? Does the staff person at the PCC know where's the appropriate place to shelter in that building if everybody's phones are going off with these new tornado warnings? Do we have that, or is that part of the emergency management as opposed to health and safety?
I think those are good points. I don't know the answer to the question about the other facilities. I know that here in the office, we don't have one, and we're working with the fire department and Michael Ross to develop that. So if it is something that comes up for the other facilities, then we can approach the fire to also help us establish that as well.
Super. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Councillor Fielding.
Thank you, Courtney. It was an excellent report. It was very concise and easy to read. Salute everybody that put it in. It must be really hard to pick out what year 1, year 2, year 3, to put them in order, because they all seem significant and important. I was just wondering the ergonomics, and you were talking about, is it just including staff, or is council going to be looked at in this, do you know, or?
I think that if you'd like to come and participate, that would be wonderful. Yes, they're open to it.
Okay, I think because just for instance, when we have budget meetings and we're here all day, it's not very ergonomically friendly. And I'm the shortest one here, and we're looking down, and people that are taller have to look down even more. I would like to see something so when we're doing that, we're not, because my neck kills me after I go home. I mean, it's like the thing with the earphones, So, I think there are some things, they're not significant, but it would be nice if council was included.
Was included, okay.
Councillor Spoulis.
No, you answered the contractor questions very greatly, so I'm quite pleased with that. With respect to the fire drills, is it strictly this building you'll be looking at fire drills, or you'll be looking at the other buildings as well?
I think to start with our emergency plan for staff, we're going to work on this office first and establish that with the department heads. And then from there, I think we would work with the facility staff and review what is happening at the ORC and at the BCC.
That's all I have.
Okay. So we knew we had some challenges probably in this area, and it's a tough question when you ask something like this, because you know that the results are probably not going to be something that's going to make you happy, but it's something you need to do, and now we have an action plan to try and deal with it. When I think about it, it talked about things coming up in performance appraisals, and we didn't have regular employee performance appraisals until only just a few years ago. But I'm really pleased with the work action that you've got here. And as it came up earlier, this idea that the thresholds, like it was 0 to 5, 5 to 20, and then 20 to 200. So, we it's 15. 15 was the threshold for one of them, and it was 15 to 200 about some of the reporting requirements. And I thought, we're just over the threshold into that next biggest group. And if you think of a 200-employee organization, they have all kinds of abilities we don't have. So that was a little bit challenging. The other one I found challenging was it referred to using an apron and goggles for kitchen chemicals. And coming from a background where we dealt with all kinds of hazardous material, and you had full aprons and big gloves and face shields and all the rest of it, I struggled with what we had in the kitchen that we were going to have to deal with that. So I don't know exactly what that was, but we might have to ask the auditor about that one. Certainly the idea of having a pilot program with fire and rescue sounds like a great idea. In fact, I'm hoping that it actually goes forward as an ongoing program, that it works out well with fire and rescue. They deal with a lot of the things on a regular basis that we might only see once in a while. It just seems like something we can really build on together. And certainly the quarterly meetings, I'd encourage you that if you need more meetings than that, you might want to start out or sort of blend into that if that's a requirement. And that's all I had to say about the health and safety audit. But while you're sitting here, I want to make another comment. I want to thank you again for the pictures on the walls of the former Reeves and Mayor. You did a fantastic job. It looks great. So thank you again for that.
Thank you, Mayor.
So I have a motion, moved by Counselor Sapulis and seconded by Counselor Fielding. The council receives report ADM 2018-030 regarding the health and safety audit, and the staff be directed to proceed with the work plan as outlined in report ADM 2018-030 in order to address the recommendations identified in the township's health and safety audit. All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Back to my agenda. Planning, roads, parks, recreation, mayor's update. Oh, I didn't have any updates. Any notices of motion? No?
I just I handed it to him.
Is that what I'm, okay. Yep. Sorry, I'm going through the agenda and looking at what the CAO handed me here. No, this is bylaw.
Oh,
Speeds.
I saw
that's
speed,
right
so I
there.
thought I handed.
Yeah, okay.
5A.
No, this is it. The report.
PW.
Oh, yeah, okay, under bylaws, all right. But then we're going to do municipal announcements first. That's what's throwing me off here.
But no,
No,
this isn't the
no.
bylaw, this is the report. The edit-
We're here with the report.
That report, this
New
is the edit
agenda.
report.
Yeah, but I'm looking on the agenda.
Addendum. It was an
Oh,
addendum.
sorry. Okay. So I'll apologize again. I'm back to my original agenda where I had my notes.
I'm the same.
So a motion moved by Counselor Sapulis and seconded by Counselor Fielding. The report PW 2018-004 regarding authorizing speed limits bylaw 53/12 be received. The council enacts a bylaw to extend the current 60 km/h speed zone westerly by 1.1 kilometers on concession 1 in Crieff, and to repeal bylaw 53/12, and that staff provide a copy of authorizing speed limits bylaw to the Ontario Provincial Police. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? That's carried. Addendums are, and the mayor aren't working out so well. Now we're back onto track, right? Let me just go over, okay, so notice of motion, nothing, committee minutes, municipal announcements, Councilor Roth.
I just have one thing. I attended the PLCA meeting, and their dredging is going exceptionally well this year.
Oh, good.
At one point in the lake, and don't ask me where it is, but they actually were digging up 40 to 60-foot trees
Wow.
that have been buried in the mud for,
How long?
well, they figure some of them might be 500 years old, but they're not worth anything. One guy thought maybe they could sell them, but apparently they're all dozy from being in the mud all these years, but yes.
Well,
So it's just a point of interest.
yep. Councilor Bulmer.
Thank you. Yes, I did receive some information through the Green Legacy Committee that I think you'd probably, will you be speaking about?
Sorry?
I received notice about the wardens planting through the Green Legacy Committee. I'm on the Green Legacy Committee. We got
yes.
notified of, so I trust you'll be addressing that? I just want
Yes,
to make,
I'm
okay,
gonna
if you
talk
weren't,
about
I
that.
was going to.
Yep.
Excellent.
No, I'll talk about that.
Super. That's it. That's all I want to make sure was on the agenda.
Councilor Fielding?
Thank you. I was going to give my AMO report from Ottawa, but considering we have more closed meetings and we've had a lot of delegations tonight, I'm going to save it for our next meeting. The one thing I just wanted to say, and it's more just for public information, I've tried to get the word out on some Puslinch websites, but I'm quite a fan of going to the theater in Toronto, the Mirvish Theater, but the worst part of the whole thing is the drive. And Mirvish Theater now has an express bus, and one of the stops is in Morriston. And you can get a bus for $30 round trip. It's a luxury coach. There's no tax. They drop you off at the door and you come back and they pick you up at the Morriston car park. And I just am so excited because I like doing that, and it just, gives me something I can go by myself if I want. I just don't like the drive. And I'm trying to spread the word because I hope people use it. There's about 4 stops, but Morriston is one of them. When I saw it on it just about popped out, my eyes just about popped out. But anyway, hopefully there'll be some people that will take advantage of that. So I'm going on Thanksgiving weekend. I'm using it with some friends. So
Oh, good. Okay, Councilor Spoulis.
Yes, I attended the Aberfoyle Fair, manning the Friends of Mill Creek booth. There's a lot of young families there. Nice to see the kids running around, and they had a snake exhibit there, and the kids were able to handle the snakes. So that was a bit of excitement for them. Another thing is, I was driving past the CBM site, and I noticed that they have a open house on September 22nd, so starting at 11 o'clock. So I guess we can go there before we see the firefighters' 50th. That's all I have.
Okay. So just to carry on about the CBM, I did get a little card about that. Did all of council not, but I can't remember whether I got it in the
No, I
mail
didn't.
here or
No,
at the
I
Didn't
county.
get anything.
Okay.
No.
Usually we do get invited.
Yeah, that's what, I just assumed.
I just saw the
everybody got-
sign, that's all I
Okay.
did, yeah.
All right. So the information, you passed on the information to everybody, then it's before the fire department's 50th anniversary. So I just have a quick question first for council. For some reason, I had in my calendar today that there was supposed to be a test alert sent out at just after 1 o'clock today. Did anybody get that? Okay, then I don't know why it was in my calendar. It must have been, somewhere it must have come up in one of our emergency management meetings or something that they were going to try it again. You remember back in the spring, they tried it, and it didn't work out. But I guess maybe it got delayed and I didn't get the notice
didn't
about
work
that.
again.
Or it really didn't work this time, because the first time I did get it, right? I was
Okay,
one of
we
the few
didn't,
that actually
yeah,
did
I
get
don't
it
think
the first
so.
time around.
My phone's too old.
Yeah. I just wanted to thank Duff's. I did write a quick note back to them about for what the little lunch that they put on for all of us, and that was really great. There was a last-minute change I just found out about today. The warden's tree planting, they check with the warden to see that the dates are okay and then try and find a locale. And the only thing I've insisted on was that it was public property. And last year we did it at the it worked out really well at the transfer station in an area that the public doesn't normally see, over the sort of hill from where the old dump was. And it worked out really well. I couldn't think of another county piece of property here that was going to work. They have the library where there's no available space really there, and Badna now and again, the lot, because they want to plant 500 trees. And so I did ask staff, to have a look to see was there any other potential for an available spot. And they came back that Badna may have the potential for it, but in the end, I think it's, I had a look, I was out that way this morning, so I had a look at the back. There is a sort of sloped area at the back that really can't be used very much, and there's actually a bigger field there than I thought there was. I guess when I looked in,
Talking the soccer field.
at
Not Badner.
no, sorry,
Barkle, you meant, yeah, I was going to say.
Borum.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, Warren, okay.
And in my mind where I was walking, but then I just realized I
didn't
just
think you were
finished talking about
describing
that. No, at Borum Park, and I walked out behind where the basketball court is now, and there's actually quite a big open space there, and I don't know whether we've ever thought about it for a potential for a soccer field as well, because there's a large part that's sort of to the west of where the basketball court is, that's pretty flat. There's a big tree sort of sticking into one corner with a big rock at the bottom. It's clearly been there for quite a long time. But that may have some potential, but of course there's no parking or anything. So if there was any sort of community thing, it would be challenging from that perspective. I'm sure the local kids use it as an open area to sort of run around in. But like I said, at the back where this was originally being proposed, there's sort of a sloped area that really doesn't, it's almost like a little bowl where the flat part is. So it was potential. Anyway, there was always a backup plan because we didn't have a county piece of property to go to Guelph Aramasa. And so to respond to your comment, I expect that we'll see something from Mr. Johnson soon about that he's gone to what was originally his backup plan, is apparently they have a toboggan hill in Guelph Aramasa, and they were going to plant the trees on the backside of the toboggan. I heard this. No, come on, don't wreck the toboggan hill. No, he clarified to me that it was the backside of this toboggan hill. So I just wanted to let anybody know. I was planning to announce this tonight, but then this last minute change came. But if anybody wants to come, when I get the details, I'll send it around to council, but I don't know if you're interested in going to Guelph Aramasa. I did participate in one at Guelph Aramasa in their Marden area once before, some years ago, and it was a pretty big, wide open area. They have a very large property there in Marden, and it was a good area to plant some trees in it, but they do need sufficient space to have all these trees, and Mr. Johnson's determined there's going to be 500 trees if we're going to plant trees at all. It's going to be 500, so, yes, Councilor.
What date was the date again? Or do you have a date?
Yeah, I did have a date, but now because
Might
the
change.
location's changed,
Okay.
there's the potential for that to change. It was
17th or 19th, I think. So.
the 12th was the Friday, October the 12th was the original date, with a rain date of Monday the 15th. Those were the original dates, but like I said, because the location's changed now, I'm not sure exactly what the dates will be. So, but I will let everybody know about it. It's quite an active morning. A lot of people are out there digging, and I can tell you when we were in behind the transfer station last year, it was a real eye-opener for people to find out what it's like to dig in Puslinch. Okay, because there really wasn't any topsoil over the real ground there. Yeah.
There was some discussion at the rec meeting last night. We had a report from the Public Works Supervisor, and there were some concerns brought up. So could I ask the Deputy Clerk if she could let the committee know that the resolution has been to that? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And that's all I had. So now we'll get to the area that I was trying to jump into, bylaws.
Well, you have to reconvene into close before you can do your bylaws, because it's your confirmatory bylaw.
Oh, yes, okay.
As well.
All right.
But if I may, just with respect to Councillor Bomer's question with respect to the dispatch agreement, if I could probably just perhaps offer an explanation, and you can let me know if you want us to seek out further information. But I would anticipate that the confidential information clause with respect to it terminating after 5 years is in anticipation that any of the records that are collected during the period of the term of the agreement, there isn't the likelihood that there's going to be a request dealing with those records after the 5-year term. And of course, if those records are supplied in confidence during that particular term, we would have to process any request to access that information in accordance with the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act regardless. However, I suspect it's because there's the unlikelihood that there's going to be the need to access those records after a 5-year period. With respect to it, the clause as it relates to liability and the section surviving the termination of the agreement, that is because if there's something that arises after termination of the agreement, at any point in time, that we're taking on the responsibility and not having the City of Guelph liable.
Understood,
And vice versa.
and that's the way I...
Because we don't know when any cause of action, may arise.
And to be fair, that's how I thought the other one would read. I expect them both to read that way, because I felt that when I read the one on confidentiality, our obligation to keep things maintain confidentiality would be permanent, not expire after 5 years. Because many of the clauses talk about maintaining these records as, treating them confidential. I don't know what the proper word is,
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with you, and we would have to guide ourselves in accordance with the legislation. I think it's probably speaking more to the other conditions within that confidentiality provisions in terms of how we will work through the process.
Understood. It was broad. It spoke to all of them.
Yes.
And I thought, well,
Yeah.
not a big deal.
So you don't want to address the first bylaw just about the speed limit first, then we'll go into close, come out, and do the confirming bylaw? Or would you prefer we just go into closed again? I apologize, we didn't complete all of the items on the closed agenda prior to the meeting, and we knew we were going to have some setup requirements for the delegations, so we decided 2 of the items we would finish off at the end of the meeting tonight.
Okay, if I may, the bylaw with respect to speed is going to flow through onto your next agenda. The bylaw that we do have is to enter into the agreement with the City of Guelph, and of course, I'm
sorry.
at council's, it depends if council wants to proceed with that right now, based on the explanation I gave, or if you'd like us to wait till the next meeting and get more information.
So is council okay then with proceeding with the authorizing the agreement, authorizing the mayor and clerk to enter into the agreement? Yes. We okay with that?
I'm just nitpicking.
No. Oh,
But it's-
Sorry, I just had one other question, and maybe it was me. We're having one of those nights. Did we have our Horizon report from our in-camera?
we did for only the first
one,
item.
okay.
We haven't addressed the other 2 items,
Right,
so.
okay.
Okay? All right, then we'll deal with this one with the agreement with Guelph. So I have a motion moved by Councillor Fielding and seconded by Councillor Spoulis. The following bylaws be taken as read 3 times and finally passed in open council, being a bylaw to authorize the entering into an agreement with the Corporation of the City of Guelph regarding the fire dispatch agreement. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay.
You
So-
need to just reconvene into closed session.
So we're going to, do we need a motion to do that?
I would need a motion to reconvene into
Okay,
closed, yes.
so moved by Councillor Rhodes, seconded by Councillor Bomer, that we reconvene into closed session. So, all those in favor?
See ya. Have a safe trip home.
I don't anticipate this will take a long time, but you never know.